In New York, landlords and tenants discuss their opinions of the new proposed good cause eviction law. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the state of New York, specifically Ithaca, New York. So in Ithaca, they are proposing a good cause eviction law, and it would only allow landlords to evict tenants for certain reasons. Okay, so it would basically force landlords to renew leases at the end of the lease term if the tenant wants to stay. And in my opinion, good cause eviction laws are a bad deal for landlords. Okay, so in this article, they actually had a city council meeting where they were discussing the issue, and they allowed both landlords and tenants to speak. So, the article goes over, and says what, various people said and what their opinions were. And it shouldn't be surprising, but there were more tenants there than there were landlords to discuss the issue. So when a city council hears, there's all these tenants, they think, oh, well, there's my voters right there. They don't think about the fact that, hey, landlords are the ones who are actually paying these taxes. Landlords are the ones who are maintaining these properties, and landlords have to make money in order for, them to pay their bills. So putting in these good cause eviction laws, it really hurts landlords and can make things problematic, okay? But before I get into the article, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. If you've already taken a look at the good cause eviction laws, what do you think of them? Do you think they're a good idea or a bad idea? I know I've covered it before in a video, but this is something new that's been popping up ever since the end of the eviction moratorium. In a lot of places, they're looking for new tenant protections to keep landlords from removing these tenants that they don't want in their properties anymore. So, this article that comes from Ithaca.com, and it says, in their words, landlords' tenants sound off on right to renew legislation. And right to renew is just another term for good cause eviction law, okay? So let's get into it. The Planning and Economic Development Committee, PEDC, decided to hold off on voting on amendments to local rental laws to give newcomer to the board, Patrick Mailer, more time to catch up on the issue. Mailer joined Common Council in October, filling the vacancy from Steve Smith's resignation. Subsequently, Mailer assumes all of Smith's duties, including his role on committees. With the entire month of October dedicated to working on the budget, Mailer said he didn't yet feel comfortable voting on the legislation as he was still working to catch up. This legislation has been a consistent point of discussion at PEDC meetings since the summer. The amendments, as currently written, tackle a host of issues, including the following. And now they're going to kind of go over the things that they are doing with this new legislation, okay? And so some of it I actually don't mind, and some of it is already law in a lot of places. So, but the part that I really want to focus on is the good cause eviction stuff. But let me continue. Requiring landlords to return security deposits within 14 days of termination of tenancy or surrender of the premises, or whichever occurs later, or to provide the tenant a written statement specifying the reasons for retention of the full or partial deposit. Requiring landlords to provide a minimum 60-day written notice to current tenants of residential unit before renewing the current rental agreement and before showing the residential unit to prospective new tenants and entering into a rental agreement with new tenants. However, the portion of the legislation that has received the most attention from the public is Article 4, Prohibition of Eviction Without Good Cause, often referred to as right to renew. This section, in its essence, aims to prevent tenants from losing their homes. It not only prevents eviction without good cause, but it also requires landlords to offer lease renewals to tenants who are not in violation of any of the outlined good causes. And of course, the big issue I have there is that, let's say that you have a tenant in your property, okay, and your tenant is paying a certain amount of rent, and you want to get a new tenant into the property who will be paying more rent, but you have to get that tenant out of there so that you can upgrade, update, and do repairs and upgrades on your property. Well, you can't have the tenant living in there when that happens. So you have to just say after the end of their lease, hey, I'm not going to be renewing it. I'm going to be updating this property, fixing it up, and then I'm going to re-rent it at a higher rate. Now, that might not sound fair to the tenants, right? But keep in mind that we're not operating this business to provide low-income housing to people. We're operating these rental property businesses to make money for ourselves, just like every other business owner, okay? They don't purposefully cut their profits so that they can provide a service at a low, cost. I mean, we're not nonprofits here, okay? We're not government entities. We are for-profit businesses, and we deserve to make money, just like all the other businesses. Okay, let me continue though. There's more. The good causes include failure to pay rent, as long as the lapse in rent did not result from unconscionable rent increases, violation of a reasonable obligation of their tenancy, a tenant committing or permitting a nuisance in their housing accommodation or damaging the property either with malicious intent or negligence, occupancy of the unit is in violation of or causes a violation of law, and the landlord is subject to civil or criminal penalties. Tenant is using the unit for illegal purposes. The tenant has unreasonably refused the landlord access to the housing accommodation for the purpose of making necessary repairs or improvements required by law, or for the purpose of showing the unit to prospective purchase mortgagee or other person having a legitimate interest. The landlord seeks in good faith to use a unit in a building containing fewer than 12 units for personal use and occupancy for themselves or their partner, spouse, parent, child, stepchild, father-in-law, or mother-in-law when no other suitable unit in such a building is available. The landlord seeks in good faith to recover any or all units in a building with less than 5 units to personally occupy as their principal residence. And when a tenant has refused to enter into a written lease with a landlord, subject to certain criteria being met by the landlord prior. Okay, and see, nothing there says anything about, hey, the landlord should be able to non-renew when they want to upgrade so that they can get higher rents or get higher value on their property. I mean, so what they're saying is the landlord doesn't have the right to make a profit off of their own property. That's what they're basically saying. They say the only reason is because, the tenant doesn't want to leave or the tenant has violated the rules. Well, no. There's a lot of good reasons that you don't want the tenant in the property anymore. Maybe you just don't get along with the tenant. Have they ever thought about that? Just because the tenant isn't making a nuisance or breaking the rules necessarily doesn't mean that the tenant is a good person that you get along with. And as soon as their tenancy is over, you should be allowed to get rid of them. Okay, just, hey, I don't want you here anymore. Please leave. I don't want your money. I don't have to take your money. Please leave. And that's what all business owners can do. If you go into McDonald's and they don't want to serve you, they don't have to. Okay? If you go into a hotel and they don't want to give you a room, they don't have no, we're not serving you here. And yeah, I don't think that this is right, okay? And there's a lot of good reasons why you should be able to not renew a lease that aren't included in this list. So, yeah, anyway, the part of the article that I really found interesting was these interviews that they do with the tenants and the landlords, and that's what I'm going to be covering next, okay? So let's get into that. So, unsurprisingly, many tenants and landlords seem to be diametrically opposed on the issue, as evidenced by a more than hour-long public comment portion of the PEDC's November 10th meeting. Below are sound bites from various tenants, landlords, and residents. For full public comment, you can watch the PEDC meeting on the City of Ithaca Public Meetings YouTube page. And I'm not going to show the YouTube video, but I am going to cover a few of the comments that are in this article just so that you can, get an idea of the things that were being said. So let's go. Teresa Alt. This law is a good basis for moving forward, but some points need fixing. One problem peculiar to Ithaca is the crazy September-October hunting season for the following year. Nobody knows if their room will be warm in the winter. Nobody knows their plan for the next year. Okay, that was a weird comment. What does the hunting season have to do with good cause eviction? But let's continue. Barbara Anger. I'm a small landlord. Tenants and landlords have a symbiotic relationship. An ordinance should protect a tenant as well as a landlord. I use my rents to upgrade and maintain apartments and pay mortgage, and particularly taxes. So yeah, she's absolutely right. So speaking as a small landlord, what I think she's trying to say here is that there's, most of the time landlords are willing to work with tenants who are, being good tenants. That's it, okay? We're not out here just getting rid of people for no good reason. I like to keep people in my properties. I do not like turnover. So, I work very well with my tenants to make sure they stay. I don't throw out crazy rent increases or none of that, and most landlords don't. Okay, but if I need to not renew, then I don't need to have to jump through 1,000 little hoops in order to do it. So this ordinance, it gives a lot of protections to the tenants, but it doesn't even think about the things that help out a landlord. And that's the problem with a lot of this legislation. But let's continue. Micah Beck. Adult humans have the right to make promises to each other and then uphold those promises. A lease is traditionally for a period of time, and this is a good thing. Choosing to not renew a lease allows a relationship to die when it has gone sour, without the rancor of involving a court. And that's another good point right there. If the relationship has gone sour, if you no longer get along with this tenant, then, you just let the lease end, and then the people can go, and then you can have your property back, and you don't have to deal with those people anymore. Okay? And, that's what I was just saying just a minute ago. Veronica Blasco. Earlier this year, my landlord told me that if he could find a party large enough to rent the entire house in which my apartment resides, he would not renew my lease for the next year. Thankfully, he was not able to find such a party, but had he been able to do so, I would have had to move, which would have caused me time, effort, and money. I can only imagine the burden that situation would have placed on an elderly person or a family with young children. Well, Veronica, the landlord deserves to have, to be able to make the most money possible with their property. So by you, holding that unit and him not being able to remove you from that one single unit, that could mean that he gives up a huge portion of his profit for the year. And, that's very selfish of you to think that you have the right to his property and you have a right to screw up his profits for his business just because you feel that you deserve to live there, and you don't, okay? Angel. My stove hardly works. My fridge spoils my food, and there is no room for negotiation for me. And I know I'm putting myself at risk of non-renewal by even telling this story. This crappy little apartment is my home. I have plants, I have pets, and I feel relatively safe in this building. Most people do not even have what I have. People need stable homes. So immediately you start complaining about stuff that doesn't work and how crappy your apartment is, and then you say you want to stay and you deserve the right to stay. If the place is so bad, move, get out. Well, you're complaining because the landlord might have an opportunity to not renew your lease. That sounds like it would be a blessing to you. I don't understand these tenants who are like, well, they can't force me to move, and then they complain about how bad the place supposedly is. Whatever, okay? Jonah Friedman. The actual outcome of this law will fail to achieve the desired objectives. Finding new renters and turning over apartments often take a large amount of landlords' time and other resources. It's expensive to place new tenants, therefore we do everything we can to keep our renters happy. And I agree with Jonah, okay? So most landlords are just like that. I just, was going over that very issue right there, okay? Most landlords want to keep tenants in the units for as long as possible. We don't try to evict. We're not trying to do a lot of, craziness. But when you do need to remove a tenant, it's nice to have that option available, especially when, the eviction moratorium was going on. that was one of the few ways that landlords here in Omaha were able to remove tenants. When their lease expired, they did not have to renew the lease. So they were able to get rid of non-paying tenants just by not renewing the lease. I'm grateful that that was here and that they didn't have any sort of good cause eviction laws like they're talking about here in Omaha. But wow, interesting article. It's interesting hearing perspectives of both landlords and tenants, but you know, at the end of the day, this good cause eviction stuff is bad news for landlords.